staying with us. Let's go back to talking about the budget. In our business studio, we've got Michael Karanja with more highlights from the day's events. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy Kachingira. And that has been Nancy talking to Interior Cabinet Secretary, a tough talking, I must say, Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri. And in studio now, I'm joined by Geoffrey Odundo, who's the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, Stanley Gundi, who's from the Tax Department at PKF, and Catherine Bogo, Tax Partner at Ernst & Young. Ladies and gents, when we just look at what was announced earlier today by Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich as far as the budget is concerned, are there any items or any areas that perhaps surprised you in as far as the way he responded? If I'll start with you, Catherine.
The surprise that I got from his comment is when he explained the scope of his work that covers across the country so many groups of security details. So from the onset, the budget looks big, but when you look at how it will be apportioned and distributed, I was surprised that this is a small amount.
Obviously, taking a cue from Joseph Nkaiseri saying 224 billion shillings perhaps is not sufficient for security. But when you just look at the appropriation, when you look at things like healthcare, education, some of the things that are more pertinent to a common mwananchi, Stanley, do you feel confident in the way the budget was appropriationed, the 2.2 trillion shillings were divided across different sectors?
Yeah, quite an interesting balancing act by the CS. Interesting to see how he's apportioned it across the different sectors. Of interest to me, I think, would be again the issue on security. Made a very huge amount and commitment, and also very keen interest. Something we'll also be looking at is the laptop project. We've always had amounts being allocated to this particular project. It's not quite clear where these amounts always go, but every year since the Jubilee government has been on board, we've always had amounts being committed to the project. So let's see what happens this year if the project will actually take over.
And just looking at that, obviously, CS was very adamant in terms of saying we are trying to get a shift where we almost at a 50% split in terms of recurrent and development expenditure. Obviously, right now we are about 64, 40, 46 when it comes to that split. But are you confident, perhaps, by the way he said that this is what we are going to spend to spur the 7% economic growth that we're targeting?
I think that was fairly a good direction it took. Personally, in my view, the focus should actually be more on development expenditure because this is what spurs the economy. And I think the minute we start taking that direction and starting appreciating that development is what drives economic growth and having more spend on the economic front, then it gives a good incentive that we head in the right direction. So in my view, he's basically began a process that will now, over time, be able to make us appreciate that development is what is key and try to stem the recurrent expenditure through various austerity measures. So I think he's basically started on the right direction.
Catherine, if we come back to you, obviously let's look at what more or less was keeping us awake, and it was, where's the money for financing 2.2 trillion shillings going to come from? So he highlighted a number of tax measures, gave us some internal and external borrowing, and basically said the budget is fully financed. Are you confident that we'll be able to fully finance the 2.2 trillion shillings, that the budget that we foresee for the next fiscal year?
Okay, from the presentations that the CES did, looks like we are confident, but the bulk of the money is expected to come from taxes, and from the performance in this financial year up to June, we can see that there is a deficit. So they still need to revamp and also modernize the correction efforts or tools that are required. But I'm almost confident that if the security is enhanced, infrastructure is improved, double sure that this is something that can be done. And Kenyans are aggressive, focused, and if they set to go, they will reach the goal.
Tax administration took a chunk of what he was talking about today, and he actually broke it down to 4 thematic areas: facilitating private sector growth, promoting equity, improving tax administration, and growth and sustainability. When you look at those 4 facets that he was actually addressing when he more or less gave his raft of taxation measures that he was going to carry out, are you confident, or do you see a change in the way government is actually viewing the most the most approachable and most confident tool that it has in actually raising revenue collection in this country?
Actually, yes. The KRA currently, for the current fiscal year, they had a target of 1.1 trillion.
Yep.
We are yet to see the figures of what they've been able to collect. The figures have been raised to from 1.1 trillion to 1.3 trillion. The whole intention is essentially to try and improve or just enhance how the taxes are being collected. Try to bring in more people into the tax bracket. And that's why we've seen initiatives in the line of some improvements in CGT, making it easier for the stockbrokers to withhold tax and remit. And also the initiative for the landlords to be able, for the ones who earn less than 10 million, to be able to compute just 12% of that and remit it to the KRA. So those initiatives will be able to essentially just bridge that gap from 1.1 to 1.3, as it has made it easier even for the taxpayer to comply. So I think we're on the right track. We should be able to meet our target.
Geoffrey, let's talk specifics here. And capital gains tax is something that came up quite prominently. People are waiting for more or less increase in capital gains tax, but we had the inverse, especially when it comes to sale of shares at the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
Yes.
So he scraps the 5%, introduces 0.3% withholding tax for the value of the sale of shares. Is it something that gives confidence to the markets? Because I know from January to about April, the Nairobi Securities Exchange was hit quite hard, especially when the uncertainty surrounding capital gains tax.
I think for us that was the greatest moment today.
Yep.
We were up the whole afternoon waiting for the second part of his budget speech.
Yeah.
And when we had capital gains tax, we were all up there saying that's it. This has been a very long debate, and certainly capital gains tax has been a very big impediment to our market.
Yeah.
We aspire to be an international financial center as envisaged in Vision 2030, and we have to get traction, especially from international investors. So this is the right direction. We have actually been engaging very extensively with Treasury and the KRA and the Capital Markets Authority to basically come with a modality that will make it easier to comply with tax payments. We appreciate that there's need for equity and the fact that we need to pay tax. So this is the right direction. The tax on transaction value, we appreciate that's the way to go. We would have loved if it was a deferment to give the market time to gain traction. Yeah. But yes, we do expect to see a good uptick now in terms of investors. Now, let me tell you one thing. The impact we saw was actually very, very grave, because regionally, none of our regional partners has imposed that tax. We are now benchmarked ourselves against top exchanges in Africa, Nigeria, Egypt. Egypt actually suspended it. So we were hopeful that that would take the place, but we are happy that they've heard our prayer, that we needed to get this tax matter resolved so as to spur the market back.
Does it restore investor confidence?
I think it does restore investor confidence. We're trading an average volume of 60% from international investors, and I believe this will also help reduce the pressure on the shilling. So for us, it's been a great achievement.
Specifics, Catherine, and something that stood out for me was the road maintenance levy. Yes. And what I found to be counterintuitive with that is that it proposed a 3 shilling increase in the road maintenance levy. That means fuel prices might be affected by this. When you look at some of the people who lost out, when we always try and look at gainers and losers, is that something that stands out for you?
Yeah, that's something that stands out for me, because the impact you cut across the population. Yeah. When it comes to fuel, we have the transportation, we have the manufacturing sector, and that is where the food stuff and where Wajiko benefits from. So to me, this one now is an indirect tax that will impact the whole population. And I think that's part of financing the budget deficit that you were talking about. Yeah. So it will cut across all sectors or everyone. So it is a major source of revenue for the government. But again, it increases the inflation and cost of living in Kenya. The other thing that came out strong, and it's in the same line, is the railway levy, which again is earmarked for infrastructure, to improve the infrastructure. This one again cuts across the population because it increases the cost of the products, services, goods. So that one also came as a strange thing to me. Most of the investors were expecting that this one will be scrapped. After all, we have the finance for the railway gauge.
The financing for that is already there.
Yes, and with the Chinese funding that one, so we expected it to go. It's a big thing across the region, and it is making our country less popular with investors. They are bringing goods through other ports. So that's something that stood out for me.
All right, let me just very briefly, as we wind up, something that stood out for me was also, it looked like the government took a protectionist stance when it came to certain industries, sugar, leather, and I can't remember the last one, but especially the protecting the sugar industry and the leather sector. Did that sound out for you, especially increasing the import duty?
Yes, that's what I was saying. It's a very interesting balancing act. What Henry chose to do is to incentivize certain sectors which Kenya has a competitive edge. You've also left out the guys who are producing plastic for toothpaste and lotions and such, the guys producing gas cylinders and such. And these are items which Kenya has a competitive edge as far as the East African community is concerned. So essentially it's making it harder for anyone to import those commodities essentially into the region because Kenyans are producing these items. And our growth will actually come from trading with Uganda, Tanzania and Rwanda. And this is a very welcome move. We are moving towards balancing our trade by being able to trade more even with our neighboring countries. So that was also a very, very good welcome move.
All right, I'm going to pass a motion here like Parliament. Happy, yay or nay?
Before I say that, I just want to say two things. Number one, he strengthened our capital markets by giving us incentives on rates and asset-backed securities that are now going to be able to offer them by offering us exemption on stamp duty for transfer of those assets. And I think, and then there's the Wanjiku bond, which is coming through the Emakiba. That is going to be a phenomenal change for our market. So in my score,
Stanley?
Happy, but my reservations will be on corruption. We've increased the budget for the DPP and the anti-corruption and also brought in, I think, another publicity stunt being called Code of Conduct or something. We need serious measures to deal with corruption. Let us put in penalties, even death penalties or life imprisonment, especially...
Something to deter.
Yes, to deter public officers.
Catherine, yay or nay?
Yeah, and I would say that the reforms that he proposed are quite positive, and there will be an impact in our economy. So to me, it is a good one. But again, I saw something on the bank where the capital was in
capital. Strengthening our institutions, Catherine.
Yes, and also now...
Let me just stop you there, but thank you very much. It has been an interesting panel discussion that we've been having here with Geoffrey Odundo, Stanley Gindu, and Catherine Bogo, just trying to analyze what happened today, especially in as far as the 2.2 trillion shilling budget was to be financed. Nancy Kachingira, what else do you have for us in the news today?
Well, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Quite a few yays you got, so that's good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as we move on,